Was a few years ago, there was a movie that was called City Slickers. Probably most people have seen that movie. And in that movie, a bunch of city boys go out to the country to ride and be cowboys. And at the end, there's a scene with a crusty old cowboy and a young whippersnapper, and he asks him what the secret to life is. And the cowboy raises and says, it's one thing. And you got to find that out for yourself. What is that one thing? That's the secret of life. And that really became apparent to me when I was in Maui this last 2 weeks. What is that one thing? And what I found was that by listening to the movie and listening to what I heard everywhere else, I was being led down a false path. Because that one thing that we're looking for, it is not different for everyone. The one thing we're looking for is the same thing. And that is the experience of oneness. So the thing that I summarize that as, it becomes an awareness that we're looking for, an awareness of truth. And once we have that awareness, we then take that awareness and then we use our individuality to create from. But to think that the one thing we're looking for is different is an illusion. Because if you come back to the very essential nature of the divine, of life itself, it is all one life expressing itself at all times. If it's all one life, then when we're connected into that one life, we are totally fulfilled and there is nothing missing. So I come to that, and I go and I was reflecting back and I was reading The Science of Mind, and I pulled this statement from Ernest Holmes. And he says that everything you have ever thought, said, done, learned, or experienced has left an imprint in your subconscious mind. So your mind has got all of these triggers all buried in on everything that's ever happened to you. But Ernest goes on further and says, this subconscious mind also contains memory images of your family, your ancestral background, and the sum total of what the whole world has thought. So think about where your mind is with everything that you've experienced, everything that the world has thought. All of that is the predominant nature of where we are today. How much of that is about oneness? Minuscule amount, isn't it? How much of it is relationship to duality? Almost everything. So where do our thoughts go? Our thoughts tend to go in the direction of the majority of what our unconscious or subconscious mind is thinking. So what was so beautiful about it is Ernest Holmes said this: people are often attracting things that they do not want into their experience because they have unconsciously identified themselves with it. So when people ask, why do bad things happen to people? It's because of an unconscious identification. It's not because people have consciously chosen to have cancer, consciously chosen to be poor, consciously chosen to be in a bad relationship. It's an unconscious identification with it. Does that make sense? Because that now gives us freedom to realize that we're not responsible for the creating of it, but we are responsible for what we do with it after we have the experience, after we have the contrast. And what can we do with it? We go in and we reflect on this idea of oneness. So you've heard me talk up here from the platform over the last 3 years about the idea of what love is. And the last best definition that I had of love was to, without judgment, care for the happiness of another and expect nothing in return. As I thought about that in meditation the last couple weeks, what came to me, that's just a way to express love. But that's not the definition of love. And what came to me is that love is the self-awareness of the experience of oneness. Think about that. the self-awareness of the experience of oneness. But that's all the words I can use. Because how can I describe an experience that is beyond description? How can I put words on something that is infinite? How can I put words on when I am so lost in something that I feel so complete and perfect? I can't even begin to describe it. It's in meditation, they say that that's the space between the words. When you think you're having that experience, you're out of the experience because you're into the mind. The single most vital step that I've come to understand in this journey of awareness, of this journey of awakening, to this journey of being one with all that exists, is to disidentify ourselves with our mind. Our intellectual mind holds us in there. Everything we think is holding us there. And when we believe that our mind is who we are, then we believe that that's the truth, and that creates our experience. So where are you going with this, Lee, you're saying? It's the idea of going beyond your mind and seeing yourself as the observer of your mind, thinking the things. So there's a greater aspect of you. There's an infinite aspect of your being. The oneness of God that is expressing as you, that's identified itself as you individualize, is seeing all of this happen, and it is being created through your mind, your intellectual mind. So when you can get into a state of awareness that mind that is thinking this is not who you are, but it's a vessel and a vehicle that the wholeness of you is using to create, now you've got control of it, and it no longer controls you. Because as long as we're on a linear path and we're thinking logical, sequential, rational ideas, we're going to follow that. And then the conclusion that we get from that will be what? A reenactment of our past. People say, why is it I keep living my past over and over and over again? Because we've not changed. We've stayed in that box, and we've not gone to the infinite oneness, love that is the universal divine. It's a way of being. Eckhart Tolle uses the word being a lot. It was fascinating. As I got on the plane the day after Easter to fly to Maui, I had Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. And I've read the book twice before. The last time was maybe 6 years ago. And as I read the book, I had to question whether I'd ever read it. Everything I was reading was new. Everything in it resonated with me at a different level than I've ever heard it before. And I got it, and I realized the reason I could get it in the different level was because my awareness has changed in 6 years. Your awareness has changed in 6 years. It's changed in the last 2 days. And so what really came to me as I reflected on this and reflected on these ideas and reflected on this, it goes back to the magnificent idea that Plato brought forth, where he said the truly enlightened person empties their mind of all thoughts and then selectively examines each of those thoughts and chooses the ones that is only useful and uses them again and puts them back. But here's the thing that Plato said. The next day, that enlightened man or woman empties their mind again and now re-chooses, because in that day, some of the thoughts from the past are no longer relevant in the today. Does that make sense? And so we're constantly developing this idea of awareness. Now, the key thing to this, and you've heard this said 1,000 times, the key thing to live the most perfect life is to be in the now. Because in the now, there is no past and there is no future. But here's the thing, the ego-driven mind will not allow us to live in the now. Because without time, it has no power. You see, if there is no past and there is no future, the ego has nothing to do. And when we're saying, oh, I'm drawing on my past to have this experience, or I'm looking to the future saying what's going to happen here, that's the ego mind taking you into it. That's not the allness. That's not the presence. That's not love drawing you there, because love doesn't care about the past and is not in the future. Love is experiencing and expressing itself right now. All love cares about is now. So when I was gathered with these people in this workshop that I did last Wednesday, I had them look at each other in the eyes and express love. And people would come back and we would have, how was that exercise? Well, I couldn't get out of how I felt about them in the past. I couldn't get how I was thinking how I'd be interpreted in the future. And so we explored that in conversation, and I said, okay, now let's put aside the past and the future. Let's forget that they exist. Let's forget that there's judgment, because in order to have judgment, there has to be a past and a future. I said, so let's put aside that, because with judgment, you can't be in the now. And I said, now say it. And the feeling and the impact in the room just swelled. How often are we concerned about acting a specific way based on a reaction we might have from another person, or a reaction we might have because an experience we had in the past? And all of those things bind us, they tie us down, they guarantee us to relive and experience our past over and over and over and over again. I'm not saying that the past doesn't have lessons, but the second the lesson is learned, let it go. Be in the now. Have no thought of ever going backwards. It does not mean you don't use your mind and think about where you want to be in the future. You take the time, you use the mind to get into that, make that plan, then come back to the now and take the next step and put all of your energy into that next step, so you're always in the now. The intellectual mind has a definite place in our lives. I'm not saying to put it aside, but I'm saying to put it in its place, to use it as the tool that it is, not to let it use you and you be the tool. It became real clear to me with all of the interactions that I was having while I was gone, was how do I stay fully in the now? And I don't know about you, but one of the tools that was described was the idea of always being present and feeling what your body is feeling. So if you're always going within, and I don't know how many of you can do this, but if you took time to concentrate, you could feel energy in a part of your body. You could feel energy maybe surging through your hand, or maybe in your feet and your legs, or you may be able to hear a vibrational sound or something like that. But if you focus on that aspect and keep something of that in your mind, that you have a focus on that all the time, it slows the mind down from thinking all of these other thoughts. And then you direct your attention to the moment. And when you've done that, the past no longer has power. The future is nothing to be feared. So I took this and I looked a little bit differently, and I said, so what about the tools that we teach at Agape? How do those tools work for us with respect to this idea? So take the idea of meditation. Meditation is about slowing the mind down to a place where we can get into the stillness, into the idea of oneness, where there is no thought. It's the space between the thoughts. When you think you're deep in meditation, you're not. Anytime you're thinking you're somewhere, you're not. It's when you're not there. That's hard to describe, but it's a feeling that when you've done it, you understand it. The thing about the ego is, remember the monkey mind? We've talked about the monkey mind going on when we try to get into meditation. Why? Because our ego mind doesn't want us to go there. Because when we go there, the ego mind has no power. Because in the now, without the past, the ego has nothing to do. It has no basis. Its foundation is shattered. So let's go from meditation as a tool and go into affirmative prayer or spiritual mind treatment. When we do spiritual mind treatment, when is the demonstration? When are we speaking the demonstration? It's now. It's never we want to demonstrate in a week. It's never we want to demonstrate 2 hours from now. We claim abundance in our lives now. We claim health in our lives now. Because in the now, the past has no power, the future has no power. You see how that works? Ernest Holmes was absolutely brilliant as he laid out this idea of affirmative prayer. That you pray as if it is done now. You do not put any thought that it's a future event. The second you put a thought that something's in the future, you've taken yourself out of the now, you've put yourself into the ego, and you've put off the demonstration of that. Pretty clear? The last thing is to live a joy-filled life now. There is no future. There's now. When you think, well, 5 years from now, this is going to happen. 5 years from now, what's it going to be? It's going to be now. So if we're always waiting for this thing in the future, no, be now. One of the greatest things about the practice of gratitude is that when you get into gratitude, I'm so blessed that Tina Gruber and her husband Rod are here. Do you know I married them about a little over a year ago? It doesn't even seem like a year ago, and yet it seems like they've been married forever. But in this now, their love is as perfect as it was the day they said, I do. But to wait for their love to get better, that's just foolish. To be in love so fully, so completely now, it's perfect. For this beautiful young lady sitting over there, it's not about her growing up and being big and all of this. It's for her to be so happy right this moment, in this now, doing what she's doing. She is a creator. She is creating bliss in her life because the future, she knows it's assured. She has no doubt in her mind. Am I right? You're going to be magnificent, aren't you? She knows it. She's got it. And she's not willing to sacrifice the now for something that you don't know what's going to happen. Why would we sacrifice the now? It's the whole idea that a lot of times is taught that we'll get our due when we die and we go to heaven. Well, let me tell you, there is no due at the end of death. There's only now. And the now that's at death is the now that is now, so you might as well have heaven now instead of experiencing hell in the hope of heaven in the future. Does that sound right? There's no need to wait for it. There's no need. Be now and be what you desire. Because when you become it, you become a magnet that is so strong that that which has always been there is clearly seen by you. And you can experience it. You see, you're not attracting something. You're shifting the focus of your eyes by being in the now, by being who you are. And that which has always been there is right there for you. So let's go back to the idea of love. The self-awareness of the experience of oneness. How encompassing is that? If I become self-aware of the experience of oneness, it must mean then that I love all of life. It must also mean that I love myself without exception. It must also mean I love my wife and my sons without exception. It means I must love you without exception. It means I must love everyone on the planet without exception. Can you feel that? That's why the practice of forgiveness is so critical, because forgiveness keeps us separate. And when we're separate, there's no possible way we can experience love. So this week, I'm going to invite you to recommit yourself to a practice of meditation, doing whatever it takes. If you haven't been meditating, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon. Focus on your breathing. If thoughts come, gently release them and let them go. I'm going to ask you to start bringing back a practice of affirmative prayer to the best that you know how. Declare for yourself that which you desire present in your life now. And then I'm going to ask you to forgive anyone and everyone that you are holding attachment to. And the way we forgive is to be able to see, yes, there was hurt, but also to see what is the good that came from that. What new awareness came from that that I will never allow into my life again, because I am the responsible one. You see, anything that happened in the past, the experience of the past, it was real when it happened. But right now, that experience, it's no longer real, because now is a different time, a different place, and it no longer has the power because you've said no to it. Most importantly, wake up every morning with the anticipation that this is going to be a joyful day, and I'm going to create it for myself. And next week, come tell me your stories.